Millie, what is this a picture of?
That is the farm where we lived, where I grew up at, and it's by Bluegrass, North Dakota, in Oliver County, and it's about 16 miles north of New Salem.
And what do you remember about growing up on this farm? What's your fondest memory of this place?
Running, running, and probably riding horses or horse. We had one horse that was a pony that was called Midnight, and you could get on him and ride with the wind, which I loved to do. And we had chores to do. We were able to play games too. My brothers were involved in baseball, and they had a team going in the neighborhood, and so at least once a week there would be a baseball game going on in the area or at our place. And I remember getting cows from the pastures and milking cows and gathering eggs and taking care of chickens and poultry.
Can you point out the different buildings for us? Is this the house here?
The house. It had one large bedroom upstairs and one large bedroom for the girls downstairs, and my parents had a bedroom, and then it was a kitchen, a dining room, and a living room, which they call the great room. And that was in the house. The rooms were large.
And then this building here?
And that was a granary to keep the grain in that they used for seed in the spring of the year. And
that little building, the little white building?
I can't see it from here. It could be the outhouse or a house for a turkey or something like that. That had the young ones.
And this white building?
I should have studied this before. I would say that was a granary too. Then the next one is a barn.
This one here?
Yes. And then over here is the pump house. That's where the well was, and it was covered with a building on it. It used to have a windmill there, but I don't see the windmill anymore.
Oh, that's right.
But yeah, they went to electricity, I suppose, by then. And over here is the hen house. Was quite a large hen house, so there were always a lot of hens kept in that that were laying chickens. And this down here is probably another granary or a bin where feed was stored in, probably for the pigs.
And were the trees here when your family moved to this place?
No, not very many of them. Of the trees, these are the trees right here. No, those weren't there. They were planted later on.
And what about the fields? What kind of crops did your family have?
My father raised wheat, barley, oats, flax, corn, and different crops over the years.
And what does this road go to behind the barn?
Behind that granary, probably went out to the fields.
And then this one here?
This one here went out to the mailbox and to the road that you took to go to town. And this went to another field down below.
And what were the roads like to the farm?
Mostly dirt roads with one trail going through, high grass on either side. Hardly any gravel that I can remember on the roads back then.
Were they pretty bad if the weather was?
If it rained, they were, yes. You had to really be a good driver in order to get through all the ruts and the mud and not get stuck.
Did that ever happen?
Oh, they got stuck at times.
Were you ever stuck?
No, I don't ever remember being stuck with a car or anything like that.
Is there anything else about your former home that you would like to add? Any observations or comments?
Well, it was a nice big home, and I think by the time I was probably 14, 15 by the time we moved from there and moved to another farm. My father kept buying one farm after the other, and then we'd be on that farm, for a couple of years, and he'd fix up the buildings and things like that. And I think probably when I was 15, we had moved to another farm from here, from this one right here. But this is where I went to school from and all that. And the other farms that we lived on then, I'd only be out there during the summer months, not during the winter months, because by then we lived in Richardson too. We had a house in Richardson and went to school there.
Millie, in this far photo here in 1938, where are you at?
In front of the house that we had out at Bluegrass. And
how old were you in 1938?
7.
So you were
7.
already in school.
Yes, yeah.
And in the next photo,
It's by the house too, in front of a rock garden, I think.
And was it normal? Did your parents take a lot of photos when you were younger?
Not really. Who I remember taking these photos was my sister, oldest sister. When she left home, she probably was 18, and then she worked for Hoskins Myers in Bismarck, which was a photo shop. And I think she came home with the first camera that I can remember, and then took pictures.
And in the next picture, you're wearing some sort of coat.
A winter coat. It probably was a winter coat made over from somebody else's big coat, because it's a homemade coat that I remember.
Was it your mother that sewed, or did you have a sister that did?
My mother and sister both sewed.
And which sister?
My sister Kay.
And then the last photo?
The last photo here is the one I think that was taken just before I started school in the first grade, because I started school at the age of 5.
And is that at the farmhouse as well?
Yes, that's in front of the farmhouse.
Millie, what is happening in this far left photo?
We had an organ in the house. I couldn't play too well on it, but some of the rest of them in the family could. I could play You Are My Sunshine, that I kind of remember. And that's both of those two photos. One's from the side and one's from the... And I remember I had a new dress there for Easter at that time.
And did your parents encourage music?
Kind of. But they weren't that they were into music that much, into singing or playing anything. But we all had a chance to take, lessons after we were living in town to play, the piano or something.
Did you do that?
I did take piano lessons, but never amounted to much.
Was that the only instrument that you did play some?
This is the only instrument, was this organ that we had out in the country on the farm. But then in Richardson, well, we had pianos up in school. We didn't have one in the home.
And we see your hair is long and curly. Was it always
Yes,
that way?
yes, and by then it had grown out. I had my first haircut when I was in the first grade. I talked about it before. But that's usually how long my hair would be at the time. It grew really fast, and it had some curl to it.
In that top right photo?
That was 1945. That's when I graduated from the 8th grade, and I remember having a new suit for graduation.
And are you at the farmhouse in this picture?
And that's at the farmhouse too. And the next picture is 1941. That's when I made my first Holy Communion, where you get dressed all in white and you make, in our church, you make your first confession and your first Holy Communion, first Eucharist. And that was taken by our house then out on the farm.
And is the white a traditional
form? For girls, yes. It's a white dress and a white veil and white shoes and that you get to wear. It's really a neat little outfit all the time. And each of us girls got to have one of those, I guess.
Was your dress homemade or store-bought?
My dress was store-bought that time, and the veil, and the shoes.
Is there anything you remember about that day?
I was able to, on that day, I had a first cousin that was with me in the class, and a boy that was, his mother was my cousin. And Grandma was with us too. This was my father's mother, and she was really happy with us that we were able to make our first confession and our first Holy Communion on that day.
Now this left photo here, taken in 1938, what were you doing?
It looks like a picture that was taken probably after I got home from school because of the dress I'm wearing and the stockings and the white shoes. So it would have been in the fall of the year, in 1938. I'd have been 7 years old on that picture.
And are you in the field?
No, that's kind of the yard in the back of the house that I can make out.
And your hair here is
short. Yes.
Is that when your father cut it?
Yes, my father cut my hair, I suppose, sometime before that.
Did you like it that way or no?
I loved taking care of it after it was cut that short. But then it grew really fast, so it got to be long again in no time.
And it's long like we see in this next
picture
here.
Yeah. And before it was cut that first time, it was much longer than that. I could almost sit on it. And this was our pony that we had. His name was Midnight, and we all got to ride him bareback. Nobody ever got to use the saddle, or I guess we didn't even have one. I think we had saddles for some of the older boys that had saddle horses, but us girls that got to ride the pony had to ride bareback, and I loved to ride that horse.
Was that one of your favorite things to do on the farm?
Yes, it was.
And how often were you able to go out riding?
Oh, whenever you had your chores finished and it was a nice day and the pony was around that somebody else wasn't riding it.
Was there a lot of competition for the pony?
Oh yes, because everybody liked to ride it. I had an older brother, 2 years older. He was always riding it too. And then my 3 younger sisters.
All rode it as well. Did you all ever ride it at the same time?
Yes, sometimes there would be 3 of us on that horse riding.
Did you
around.
ever feel sorry for Midnight?
No, because he put up with everybody and anybody. It didn't make any difference. He was a pretty gentle horse, trained that way.
Millie, we see a buggy and horses hooked up here. What is happening?
That was the way we would travel to school. I wasn't going to school yet at the time because I see my older sister Kay is on the picture, and she was going to school with the 3 brothers that were in between the 2 of us. And she hated walking, so she always had them guys hitch up the horses to the buggy and they'd ride to school, or the sleigh during the winter months. Where then when I started school, they'd sooner pull me on a sled going to school instead of hitching up those horses. And you know, you had to take care of those horses and see that they were fed when they had them at the schoolhouse. And there was a barn at the schoolhouse where they were able to keep the horses in.
And how long was the ride to school in the buggy?
Yeah, about 3 miles, I'm sure. It took a good almost an hour to get there. Same way with walking. because they didn't run the horses too fast at all.
So they just kind of walked them along.
Yeah, to school. I think that's the same picture as the one we took before with the coat on. That's just a larger picture.
And how old were you?
What did it say on there? Where I have the coat on.
1937, so about 6 years
Yes, about 6 years old. And it's probably a coat I wore to school.
And is this you on the left?
Yes, that's me and my sister Sally. In front of our house, sitting on the steps there. I think we had cement steps, and that was the door behind us. And Sally was the one that had the red hair and the freckles.
Was that unusual? Did anybody else in your family have
Yes, Kay had the red hair and the freckles too, and then my oldest sister and myself had dark hair, and then 2 of them had blonde hair. So we had every type of hair in that family, as far as us girls were concerned.
Did you resemble your parents in that way, or how did you come by so many?
Well, my mother's mother was a redhead with freckles, so, but there was only 2 of the girls that ended up with the red hair and the freckles.
And who are you with here?
My sister Maggie, she's 2 years younger than I am, and we're sitting in front of one of the first cars, big cars that we must have had. I think it was called a Nash car. But we were all able to get into it and go to church on Sunday.
All 12 of you?
Almost.
Did you have to alternate on those days?
Not really. We mostly all got into the same car, double deck. Until you were there.
And what can you tell us? What was your sister Maggie like? Growing up.
Oh, we got along okay. She had a completely different personality than I did, that I know, and she still does. She lives on Vashon Island in Washington right now.
And in this picture we have 3 of you children, and then who is that standing behind you?
My grandmother, my father's mother, Catherine Dahl, and the one over on that side is Bertha Steckler. She was my first cousin, and the boy was Thomas Wedge. His mother was my first cousin, and then myself. That's the time we made our first Holy Communion together. We were all in the same class.
And what was Thomas's last name again?
Wedge.
Can you spell that for me?
W-E-T-C-H.
And was there a celebration after the first communion?
Oh yes, there usually, my mother would fix a nice big dinner, and the pastor, the priest, would come out for it, and probably some of the relatives and grandparents.
So it was a big deal.
It was a big deal, yes, for you that Sunday. I remember the pastor being Father Bede, and he'd come from the Abbey, and one thing he always had along with him when he'd come for a meal or a visit was the best candy you wanted to win, wrappers that you wanted to eat, and he'd pass those around.
Well, this picture we have a stair-step situation. Can you tell us
Yes.
who the kids are?
Okay, that's the 5 younger ones, and
Start on
Bertha, she was a baby for a long time, and Sally, Maggie, myself, and Matt. There was about 3 years difference between Matt and Lee, you know, so we were the 5 younger ones.
And did you get along best with, who did you say?
With my brother Matt.
And what kind of things would you and Matt do together?
I was always his helper, you know. He had to do a lot of the chores and things because my next brother probably was 3 years older than him. And he was more of a mechanic for a tractor. That's what he liked doing, so that's what he got to do, was run tractors and stuff. But we mostly, the two of us there, got to do the chores around the farm.
And did your younger sisters, did they help as well at that time?
Oh, yes, yeah, whatever they could do.
And are you wearing a scarf
On my
here?
head? I can't
It
tell.
looks like you have something over your head.
Probably is a kerchief.
Was that what you would usually wear outside?
If it was cold, yes. Yeah, yeah, everybody kind of has a cap on, yes. So it had to be on a cold, windy day.
Okay, and this is you with your sisters?
Yes, and that was our front room or living room. And the chair, I have the chair sitting right there that you see in that picture, was my father's favorite chair. And I went later on and had it. I had it refinished in the same color. It isn't quite the same material. And you want the names? The candle burning?
No,
I
the
see.
name.
Magdalene, Maggie, and then Sally, Bertha, and myself.
Is this Sally and Bertha?
Yeah. And then we're front of a little table, what they call the Ikdishel. And on there usually there was the crucifix and a Bible and probably some rosaries and some holy pictures. And we were all able to get on our knees over the years, especially during Lent, and we'd say the rosary together in that room in front of the, you know, table. It was just a small little table with a tablecloth on it.
Is that where your family would usually gather for?
For prayer? Well, no, during, before meals you gathered around the table, but for evening prayers, that's where we'd gather.
Would you dress up for evening meals?
This looks like it could have been a Christmas day. That's why we're dressed up. I know my dress on there is boughten, but I think the two younger girls have dresses that my mother made.
Did you have hand-me-down dresses at all?
Oh, yes.
This looks like
Right.
Christmas.
Yes,
here.
and this we were wearing the same dresses. This is why I think, you know, that's what it was at Christmas time, as we were on the other picture in front of the chair.
And can you tell me who's in this photo again and
And
the back? Is that Sally?
Maggie and myself, and then Bertha and Sally, and they had each gotten a doll for Christmas.
Were Christmas gifts usually dolls, or did that? Was that a special year?
Not especially, because I think that year I probably got a storybook or maybe, you know, something like that, or a game.
What is
'Cause
the
I was-
light on the tree that we see?
Those are candles burning. That's how you lit up your Christmas tree at that time. There would be candles put onto holders, and you'd pin them onto the tree branch. And you could burn them so long, about an hour, and you'd have to blow them out because that would be the end of the candle.
And was this a yearly tradition? Was this Christmas Eve or Christmas Day?
It could have been either, you know, that the candles were used. Probably they were usually used Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. They always replaced the candles after one burning.
And this is the farmhouse you grew up on?
Yes, it is.
And what was it, white on the outside?
Yes, I always remember it being white.
And it looks like there were 2 floors here. Do you know what these rooms were on the bottom?
This was a bedroom upstairs where the boys all slept. And then below it was the living room. And then the first window was the bedroom for my parents. And then the second window that you see there was the girls' bedroom.
And was the landscape always this bare that we see here?
Pretty much so. They just kept the grass chopped down, but there was no lawn. It was, mostly weeds, I think, at the time.
And is it a clothing line that we see out front here? No.
It looks like, I can't remember, that there could have been a clothesline there. Sometimes, there were more than one clothesline because of all the clothes that would have to be dried.
Looks like we have some workers here.
Well, this was during harvest time and thrashing time, and my father usually, because he had the thrash machine and run the machine, he would hire extra help. And I think those are 2 hired men with the tractor, and can't see from here. Can I move it?
Now, who is in this photo and what are they doing?
They were 2 hired men that were probably hired for a month or so during thrashing time to help out, And that's a John Deere tractor, a pretty new tractor that we must have had. But in a way, they've got a stone bowl, which is a flat metal deal, and what they've got on there is sacks full of potatoes, where those 3 guys must have been out. Probably was, rainy weather that they weren't thrashing, and they dug all the potatoes, and then they brought them, and somebody took their picture in front of the house, because then the potatoes were loaded down into the cellar.
How many potatoes would the field give you?
I don't know. It looks like they've got about 5, 6 bags, 100 pounds of potatoes on there, and they probably, made more than one trip of bringing them in.
And here we have the thresh machine.
Yeah.
What are they doing? There's a truck. Looks like the truck, and then the machine is in the background there.
Right. Onto the truck is where the grain went that got thrashed out of the machine. And the shadow had to be my sister taking the picture. And the one up on the thrash machine would be Lee, because he was the mechanic and the grease person that kept all the machinery greased all the time to run. And I think the photo, that one up there, yes. And then the other person looks like a hired man.
Now, this is a different view of
the thrashing going on, and I remember thrashing from the time I can remember anything going on at our farm until even they were still thrashing when I got married, because the week after Adam and I got married, we went and helped finish up thrashing so my brother and his wife could get married, or friend. Thrashing crew.
This is threshing again.
Yes.
It's a different view. Can you show us the process that they were going through here, loading the hay? Or?
Well, where you see right there, those would be the guys with the bundles coming in the wagons, and they usually had horses in front of those wagons, and they would be pitching it into the machine. And then you come further back here, that looks like the straw coming out of that pipe and going onto that big pile right there. And then the truck was still, sitting there, so the grain somehow must have went, there was an elevator where the grain went into the box on the back of that truck.
And here we have, is this you on a tractor?
No, that looks like my sister Bertha, and it has to be a new tractor that we have gotten, and then behind it is the hen house that we had on the farm, so that was taken on the farm. And I think that's a Case tractor.
Did you ever ride this particular tractor?
Oh yes, we all, when somebody was driving, when you could stand on the back, and everybody get a ride. She probably was playing on it, and somebody took her picture.
And here we have some family members.
Those are really some old pictures because they look like they were taken back in about 1920 or so. And it's my mother's brother and sister on both pictures. Her sister Magdalene and her brother Leo.
Did you see them often?
Yes, Magdalene, Aunt Magdalene, and Uncle Ralph lived in Butte, Montana. They would come back to visit us at least, once a year or so. And whenever we went traveling, we would stop to see them. They didn't have any children. And and he worked in the mines up in Butte, Montana. And then my mother's brother, that was her only brother because she had lost a younger brother about 10 years old from diphtheria. And so this was the only brother she had left, and he lived on the farm, my grandparents' farm on my mother's side at Yukon, North Dakota. And then later on they moved into Mandan, and I can remember him, I stayed with them when I went to grade 7th and 8th grade at St. Joseph's grade school in Mandan, and he always run a standard gas truck. That's what job he had while they lived in Mandan. He hauled gas for Standard Company.
So were you close to them?
Oh yes, very close, because I lived with them for 2 whole years.
And what was that experience like?
Their sons are just coming to see us again in July, and they were younger. Their children were 4th and 2nd grade, and one of them probably starting in the 1st grade, and she had a baby while I was living there. So they had 4 children, and I would babysit a lot for them.
And this photo, who is this?
This is my parents, my mother and dad. They were both in the nursing home in Gunala, North Dakota, and his birthday is in March, and this must have been taken March 9th on his birthday. And then he died in April the 25th, so he wasn't in the nursing home too long, but he had a stroke shortly before that.
And what were your parents' names?
John and Margaret Dahl.
Were you able to attend and see him on his birthday this time?
Yes, I was at the nursing home at that time. In fact, I was with him the night he died. I was the only one that was staying with them that night and that he passed away.
And where was he buried?
At New Salem, North Dakota.
We'll start on the left photo here.
Over by you. Okay, that's Catherine and Ludwig Dingus, which would have been my mother's parents.
Did you ever know them?
I vaguely remember the grandfather, but I would have been 7 years old when he died. But then the grandmother later on, had a house in Dickinson, and I would go and spend weeks with her during the summer months when I wasn't going to school, and she lived in Center, North Dakota.
Were you close to her?
Yes, but not as close as I was to my other grandma.
And in that next picture?
Those are my parents. My father, John, was 23. My mother was 21. That was when they got married, but they've always told us that they had the wedding picture taken a year later.
Did they say why they did that?
Because they had gotten married in November and it was a terrible winter that whole winter, and so they just put it off until they were able to go to Mandan to have this picture taken.
Did that often happen in those days that they would?
I suppose that you just didn't take time out to go do it because of the weather.
And did your mother ever talk about how she and your father met?
I don't know if I really remember. I really can't tell you how they met that I can remember.
Did they have a happy marriage? What kind of marriage
Oh,
did they
yes,
have?
yes.
Who was the stricter parent with you and your siblings?
Oh, probably my father, but not that he was really strict.
How would he discipline you and your siblings?
He'd holler at us. I don't remember ever getting a spanking very often or anything like that. My mother did scoldings, but that's kind of what I remember for discipline.
And in that last photo, is it your grandparents?
My father's parents, yes.
And do you remember them?
Yes, I remember them real well because when we lived on the farm, they lived a short distance away from us, practically on the same section of land, And we would, the cows were in the same pasture, so we always had to go get the cows and divide them, he had 7 cows all the time, I remember that. And so we had to take his 7 cows up to his barn, and then we could take the rest of the cows back home to our barn to be milked, and he milked his own by hand.
Was that the only way that you helped your grandparents, or were there any other?
Oh, we would go up there and help him with his garden. He always had a garden and all that too. Yeah. And then Grandma always had cookies or some big bread or something ready for us when we'd stop in.
Millie, who do we have in this top left photo?
My mother's 2 sisters, and their names were Otelia and Magdalene.
And do you remember them well?
Yes. I remember them up until they both passed away. Visit them whenever we could. Aunt Otelia lived in Tacoma, Washington, and Aunt Magdalene lived in Butte, Montana. And then, I had 2 sisters that lived out west. So whenever you traveled to see any of them, you stopped in to see those 2 aunts.
And what were they like?
Different than my mother, I think.
How so?
But I think my mother was much gentler than they were. But on Otelia had a family of 7, and then on Magdalene, didn't have any children. So, but I remember them really well, and in fact visited with both of them just shortly before they passed away.
And in this photo on the right, the 2 little boys?
Boys, those were my mother's 2 brothers, and the one standing up is the one that died at the age 15 of diphtheria, and so I didn't know him very well at all. And then the other one on the bike is Uncle Leo, and he was a favorite uncle of mine. That's who I got to live with for 2 years when I went to school in Mandan.
And what was the uncle on the left, his name?
Pius.
And what do you remember the most about your Uncle Leo?
I liked him really well.
And in the small photo?
That's my mother and dad, probably shortly after they were married.
And how long were they married?
They had, Adam's parents and my parents both had their 50th anniversaries, that I remember. 67, 67. They were both married. Adam's parents were almost married 70 years. They died in December, and their anniversary was in January. Both of them died about 10 days apart. And then my parents, my father died in 74, and they had their 50th in 67. So that's how long they were married.
Who are the 2 gentlemen in this photo, Millie?
My mother's 2 brothers. The one of them, the smaller one, was Uncle Pius, and he died from the diphtheria, and then the other one is my Uncle Leo Dinos.
So
He lived in Mandan. The same as the picture before, except taken at a different time.
Millie, we have 2 individuals in this left photo. Who are they?
That's my oldest sister Tilly and Sally. And it's in front of the house in the flower bed there, I think.
And
taken about in 37th, huh?
What was your sister Tilly like?
Oh, she was a very nice person. I got along really well with her all the time. And she was always looking out for everybody in the family.
So she was a caregiver there.
Right, yeah. And like I say, most of these pictures, she was the first one to get a camera. I think she came home. All these pictures were taken at that time, probably what they've got on there in 1937.
And on that picture on the right?
And that's my sister Kay and Sally, taken in the same place as the other picture. So they were taking each other's picture, I'm sure, with Sally. Looks like she could have been the baby at the time.
And who are the two guys on the left here?
And that's my brother Joe and George. 1931. It looks like they're standing in front of a new car that we could have probably had, my father could have probably got at that time.
And did you know Joe and George really well growing up?
Yes. George was the oldest one, and he was in the service for over 4 years. But Joe was lived at home, you know, and worked at home until up till to the time he got married.
And on the picture on the right?
That's myself, shorter hair, and Maggie and Sally, the three of us, in front of our house out on the farm. And we were able to wear, can't believe it, anklets with probably new shoes, and it probably looks like we had some new Easter outfits.
Who do we have in the left photo, Millie?
My brother George, and a case tractor, and it looks to me like the tractor is hooked up to a thrash machine, maybe. Well, or maybe a grinder or something. They use the same belts for something like that, too.
There's a milk
And a milk container probably had water in it.
Okay. And on that picture on the top right?
Oh, I thought that little one. That's my brother Joe, and the car is a Model A, which probably would have been my oldest brother's first car that he got. And Joe probably got to drive it.
And here?
That is Lee and Joe. And what they're holding up is tiny little foxes where they must have found the fox den and they emptied it out and they brought the foxes home. And they're holding them.
Could they go hunting for those?
Right, because they could sell the hide of a fox, you know, for a little money. And so they were always out there hunting rabbits and foxes and coyotes. And they each had shotguns.
Picture here?
And that's my brother Joe in front of that, no, that's a Chevy car. Would have been one of the cars that my father had.
Did he have a lot of cars?
Over the years? No, he usually drove a car a long time. The same car. We had more tractors.
And here we have another one of your brothers with a car. Looks like Matt.
Matt in front of a car. And it's a Hudson. Yeah, that was a big car.
Is this a car
1941
that
Hudson.
the family would take to church?
Church, yeah.
And
that
everyone
would be.
would fit?
Yeah.
And then in this photo, is that Joe?
Joe on the same car.
Did all of your brothers drive the car at some point?
Yes, they did. They all could drive the car.
And that last picture?
That looks like my brother Matt on a new tractor they had gotten. Looks like a John Deere.
Now, Millie, who do we have in the top left photo?
My brother Joe, and it looks like in 1945 he could have probably gotten a new car for himself there at that time that he was driving.
And where is that taken?
It's in the background is the house that we had out on the farm.
In that second picture?
It's the same thing. That's Joe too, and standing by the house. White shirt on. They usually, that's what they wore for dress up, with a tie.
And then down here?
Or a suit. There he has a suit on. He's still standing in front of the house, except in a different place, different time.
And the middle photo?
The middle photo,
Joe.
he must have gotten a cowboy hat. And standing by the bushes, yeah.
And the final picture here?
It would have been one of their horses that they, it isn't that small pony that we had, it's a larger horse that they would ride. they used to have horse and ride to the neighbors a lot, you know, to visit the other guys and things like that.
Just your brothers did?
Yeah. They were all horseback riders.
Now, Millie, in this top left photo, is that...
Is my sister Kay and brother Joe. And he looks like he had just gotten out of the hospital when we were taking family pictures at that time, because I remember him having an appendix operation shortly before that.
And what kind of health care did they have available at that time?
For something like that, you had to go to Bismarck in the Bismarck Hospital. Because I remember that's where I had mine taken out too.
And that second photo?
That's my dad, and then Bertha, the youngest, and Sally, and then a cousin of mine, Eileen. Cream can sitting there, probably had water in it, that you could have a drink outside.
Who do we have in the bottom left photo, Millie?
That's 1941. That's my oldest sister, Tilly, and then Bertha and Sally. And she posed to have their picture taken together.
Is Bertha on the right? Or is Bertha
Yes,
the little one?
Bertha's the little one.
Bertha's this little one?
Yeah.
Okay. And that... you?
That would have been taken in 1946, 45, 46. That's the first year I went to high school. That's my first high school picture. And then Maggie would have been in the 7th grade, and Sally in the 5th. See, those are our school pictures.
You say Sally was in the 5th grade?
Right, and Bertha probably in the 2nd. I think there was 3 years between them.
Did you all have to go to school in the same place at that time?
Yes, we all, at that time we were going to St. Mary's at Richardson, North Dakota.
Now, in the top left photo, is that you there? dressed up? Who's in the top left photo, Millie?
And that's Kay or Catherine, posing for a picture in 1941.
And then the second photo?
The second photo is George.
And were
Same
pictures
year.
usually taken on Sundays when everybody was dressed up? Or?
It looks like it. If they have a white shirt on, that's how they got dressed to go to church.
And that third picture?
That's George. That, you know, we've had that on the picture before. It's, to me, it's some kind of flower probably seated there and growing, and it isn't blooming yet. You know, in the rock garden.
Oh, in the rock garden?
Yeah, right.
Was that always around the house, or did your mom plant it?
Well, I'm sure my mother, you know, planted it, or somebody did, even my sister.
And what is that last small photo there? Is that George as well?
That's George, 1936.
And then this picture?
1942. That's when he must have been in the service. That he looks like he has the army uniform on there. And then this one over here would be before he went to the service, 1941. That's in the, I think that was taken in my sister's apartment in Bismarck, because I don't remember the chair and the lamp.
Which sister?
Tilly.
And that final picture?
That's George. Brother George.
And what was George like? What kind of a brother was he?
Well, he was my oldest brother, and like I say, he spent, 4 years in the army, got wounded and all that. And then, so he was away. I just remember him being away most of the time as I was growing up.
Starting here, is that George again?
No, that's Joe. And that picture's taken in the living room of the farmhouse.
And next to him? In that
Yeah, that's Kay, and that was taken in the living room of the farmhouse.
And then next to her?
Is George, but that picture looks like it was taken in Tilly's apartment in Bismarck.
And that final picture there?
That's Tilly, my oldest sister, and that looks like it was taken in her apartment.
And this first picture here
Yeah.
looks like a group photo of sorts, but where is everybody?
Beside a greenery on the farm. The tall one standing up is my sister Kay, but I can't make out who. But I think it's the whole group of us. My 3 brothers. And how many are on there?
7?
5, 6, 7. Right, would have been my 3 brothers and us 4 girls and my older sister Kay.
Okay, and the second picture there?
That's a picture of the farmhouse out on the farm. And I think, like you say, it was always painted white.
And it still looks like the landscape is rather bare around
Around the house, yeah.
the house. Is that how you always remember it looking?
Yes, yeah. The house was kind of up on the hill, and not even the grass would grow around it.
And that
The
last
garden was behind the house, and the back of the house was plowed up, and that's where the garden was. Okay.
And that last picture there, we got horses
Right, and I think that's the well we had up on the hill, and somehow these horses are there drinking water. And we always had quite a number of horses.
About how many would you say the family had?
To me, it looks like these are 6 of them here on this picture. I'd say 6 or 8 horses.
Millie, who do we have in this first picture here on the left? Johann Sebastian Hauck? It looks like. Is that Adam's relative?
That would have been Adam's great grandfather, huh?
And then the second photo on the right?
Those are Adam's grandparents. Adam and Cecilia Hauck, and he was named after his grandfather.
And in this large, we have a group picture here in the corner.
That would have been Adam's grandparents, and their whole family is on that picture, and it was taken in Russia.
And did you know his family pretty well?
Yes, I did. I did get to meet all of his uncles and aunt, except that they had some too that stayed in Russia, so aren't on the picture.
And how old was Adam when he came to the United States?
This was Mike, is Adam's father, and he was 16 years old when he came to the United States in 1911 with his parents.
And the left photo, right here?
Those are Adam's mother's parents, and that's Anton and Helen Fleckenstein.
Did you ever know them?
No,
Were
no.
they stay in Russia?
No, he is buried here at Richardson, and she's buried at Haines, North Dakota. So I've been to the cemetery, to the graveyard where they're both at.
And this photo?
Is Adam's mother's First Holy Communion picture. And she's on the left.
And then in this photo here?
And that's Anton and Helen Fleckenstein's family.
So was it his mother's family?
His mother's family, yes.
Did you know any of his aunts and uncles?
Yes, some I didn't know.
And on that last photo on the right?
Those were his two aunts and an uncle. And I think I got to meet one of them.
Did you remember them, the one you met? Who was it that you met? Martha?
Martha's
August,
the one I met. Martha
Anglina?
and Angelina. Yes, I think I met both of his aunts on that picture. And then the man is, what's his name on there?
August?
August. I didn't know him. I never met him. He must have passed away before I came along.
Who do we have in the top left photo, Millie?
Mike and Tilly Hauck, and those are Adam's parents, and that's when they got married.
And how do you remember his parents? What were they like?
Very well, very nice people to be related to, because they spend a lot of time with us out here on the ranch. He would come out every day and help Adam out in the fields and stuff, and she came along quite often. In fact, I learned to cook from her, because I looked at it this way, she cooked what Adam liked. And so most of my menus today are more related to her style of cooking than my own mother's.
So she actually taught you more
Yes,
about
she
cooking than your
did,
own
and
mother
she'd
did?
come out here and she'd babysit for me and all that.
And what about his father? What was he like?
Oh, he loved the children. Oh, he was really happy with his grandchildren, and so he was always, if he was in the house here, he was sitting holding one or two or three to keep them quiet.
And that second picture on the right?
That would have been their wedding picture and their attendants, and I can't tell you who their attendants were at that wedding.
And on that bottom photo?
The bottom photo is the whole family, which would have been Mike and Tilly and Helen, and then Adam and Rosemary and Minnie.
So were this Adam's parents and his siblings, or?
Yes, yes. Adam has 3 sisters. They're still alive. He was the only son in the family.
Millie, this is Adam's parents again. What is special about this picture here?
That was their 60th anniversary, and they both lived until a month before their 70th anniversary.
And what happened then? How did they die?
Adam's mother was in the nursing home for about a year, and then his father joined her, and they both died in Dickinson and are buried at the Richardson Cemetery.
Millie, this is Adam in this top picture here?
Yes.
And when did you meet him?
Oh, probably 3 years before we were married. But I didn't date him until I was through high school.
And what about that group picture there?
The group picture, I think, is taken of his grade school group that went to school when he did in 1938, and I think it's taken by a schoolhouse that used to be about a mile across the road here.
And then this picture?
That one looks like it's a whole bunch of his friends and him in that picture.
Did you know any of his friends?
Oh yes, I knew all of his friends too. They were all guys from Richardson too.
And in that last picture?
And that's a picture of Adam and his pony riding horse. He traveled in his younger days, traveled a lot with the horse. They'd ride to see, each other in the neighborhood, the guys that lived in the neighborhood here.
And is this him again on horseback?
On a horse. I can't tell you the horse's name, and I don't think it got written down, or it's a picture. And the dog, and it looks like it was snow on the ground.
And that second picture on the side?
That's Adam and his sister Helen in 1948.
And that last picture, he's on horseback again?
Yes.
Was that his mode of transportation in those days?
Well, I suppose, but he had a car pretty young too.
And here he is, just a little bit older. Is this about the time you met him?
Probably, yes. It looks like it. Yeah.
And that second?
Maybe not.
No,
That
1940?
1940. No, I don't think I knew him then. I didn't know him then because I didn't move to Richardson until 45, and those were his car that.
What about
he
that
had.
top picture there?
The top picture is a convertible that he had gotten as a car in 47, and that was even before I knew him.
And then this picture?
That's another car. I don't know if it's the same car as up above here or a different car.
A red car?
A red car. I guess it was a red convertible.
And that last picture, graduation?
And that's his graduation picture. Yeah.
This top left photo here, is this your mother's?
My father's side of the family, those are dolls, and he has two older sisters that were married in Russia, and so they didn't come along over to America with him, and neither did his brother, who was Joseph, who was in the service at the time, and he must have been in the Russian Revolution War.
Did your dad ever talk about him?
Yes, he did mention him, yes. Yeah. He had just gotten drafted into the service when they moved away from there, I guess.
And he couldn't leave at that time.
Yeah, right.
And that second photo beside the group photo, is that your grandpa?
And that's my grandfather, yes. Yeah. He was a real tall man with the whitest hair, blue as eyes.
And on the bottom left, it's his birthday, 90 years?
Yes, that's a birthday cake they had for him. Right. I kind of remember him blowing out all those candles on there. They had 90 candles on there.
Did it blow up the room?
Yeah.
Did he have a lot of family there to celebrate with him?
On his 90th birthday, I think they all got together.
Do you know who made his cake?
His oldest daughter he was the one that made the cake.
And on the bottom right?
And that's my grandmother. I remember I was in the 7th grade when she died.
And where is she buried?
Both my grandparents are buried at New Salem Cemetery.
Now, this is your mother's family?
Yes, and they came to the United States, as a young family. My mother was only 2 years old at the time, so this picture is taken in the United States. And they came over in 1900. So the family picture is taken after they were here in the United States a while.
And which one in this picture is your mother? Can you point her out? It says
Okay.
Ophelia, Magdalena, Margaret.
Okay, my mother's the one at the end here.
Yeah. And did you know your grandparents pretty well on her side?
My grandfather barely. I remember when he died and was buried, kind of. So my first memory of him, but my grandmother I knew pretty well.
And on the middle, on the right, that photo? Right there.
Those are my mother and her 2 sisters.
Did you know them well? Ophelia?
Yes, I knew her sisters really well. Got to see them a lot, at least once or twice a year.
And on this last photo here?
That would have been my mother's grandmother. And she stayed in Russia. She didn't come over here. Somehow she had a picture of her.
In the top left photo?
That is my mother's parents, Ludwig and Catherine Dingus. And her maiden name was Heinz.
And you didn't know them, did you?
Yes, I
You
did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And was this what they would typically wear, or is this a special occasion kind of outfit?
Well, with her having her cross on and everything, and his looks like a suit, I think it would have been, Sunday, going to church clothing or something.
And on that top right photo?
That's my parents, my father's parents, and my grandfather there is holding a peace pipe that he had gotten from one of the Indians because at their house he had some Indian friends and they'd stop in, and my grandmother always seen to it that she had a loaf of bread for him. And so one day they brought him that peace pipe that
Was it a treasure to him?
Oh, it was. He had it for years. I don't know whatever happened to it.
And this bottom left photo?
That is my whole family. My parents. So my mother standing and my dad sitting down is their wedding picture.
Is this the one that you said they took a year later?
Yes, after they were married, yeah. They put on their wedding clothes and they were in Mandan and they had the picture taken.
And that last photo on that page?
That's the family, my family that I come from. Everybody's on there. And I think family pictures were taken because my oldest brother had come home on a furlough from the service. I see his army uniform on. And so we're all on that picture.
And in this first photo here, is that you and your sister?
My sister Sally. She probably was a baby at the time.
And in that second
This next one is myself and Maggie. Maggie was 2 years younger than I.
And this Christmas photo?
That's all 4 of us younger girls taken at Christmas time with the candles on the tree. On the Christmas tree lit up, smoke. You get to see in the picture.
And that last photo?
That's my first Holy Communion picture. taken with my grandmother and my cousin Bertha Steckler, and then Tommy Wetch, whose mother was my first cousin. And junior and senior pictures.
Can you tell us a little bit about these pictures? And this is what, 10th grade?
Right, I would have been 10th, 9th grade, 9th.
And then
10th, and 11th and 12th.
Do you remember taking these pictures?
The first two were taken in school. That glamour shot must have been taken in the studio, and then this one over here is my graduation picture.
And did they do those in school as well, or did you have to
No,
go somewhere?
you had to go to the studio to have those done.
Millie, who's in this top left photo?
Those are my parents, Margaret and John Dahl. And it was taken, I think, when my second youngest sister got married in 1955, probably at Osborne's studio in Dickinson.
And in that top right photo?
And that's my parents again on their 50th anniversary. And that was taken in 1967. And this picture was taken at the Social Center in Richardson, where they held their doings for their 50th anniversary.
Do you remember their 50th anniversary?
Oh yes, really well, because I helped plan it.
Did that take a long time?
Yeah, it did. Wrote out the invitations and all that.
And in that bottom photo?
That would have been taken at, my parents aren't on there. Okay, my parents, this one where they were gone. Let's see.
Is that just your siblings?
Right,
siblings?
those are all my sisters and brothers, and it was taken in 1995, but we're all on that picture. I can't even see myself, yeah. And I think it was taken at my oldest sister's anniversary. Tilly.
Millie, is this a wedding announcement for your wedding here? It says Dahl, Hauck, vows are exchanged recently.
Oh, it would have been about our wedding, after our wedding, that it was in the paper. I don't think and they didn't do pictures at that time either. They just would do a write-up that you would send them.
So did you have to write up what you wanted them to say in the paper?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
I think a friend of mine, the bridesmaid, did the write-up.
And this looks obviously like your wedding photos here.
Yes, taken in Bismarck.
Both of these top ones were taken
Yes,
in Bismarck?
yeah, and the group picture.
Okay. Well, let's start with this one.
Yeah.
Where did you get your dress?
I got my dress in Bismarck at, God, I can't remember the name of the store now, and it was so familiar. Anyway, both of my daughters wore the same dress, and I paid $150 for it.
At the time,
with the veil, yeah, right. And both of my daughters then decided to wear the same dress with different veils or different headpiece.
And what was your wedding like? Can you take us through your wedding day?
Oh, day. Well, we only lived, our house in town was 2 blocks from the church. So I know I got ready in my folks' house, and so did the bridesmaids. And then Adam's parents lived in Richardson too, so he was over in the other house. And we got together, and our parents both give us their blessings first before we went into the church. And then we had a regular a mass, at 9 o'clock in the morning, because we were going to New Salem for dinner. And a sister played the organ, and the choir sang for it, and then a friend of Adam's sang some solo songs for us. I remember that.
You remember any of those songs?
One of them was Ave Maria. Yeah.
And can you describe the reception for us?
The reception then was held at New Salem with a noon meal, which was, chicken noodle soup and chicken and mashed potatoes and all the trimmings. And it was served in the auditorium at New Salem because there really wasn't a hall that was big enough to hold the crowd that we were going to have at this wedding, because we had about 250 people invited. And our meals, we after the noon meal, we had a short dance where we were able to dance, and then we went and had our pictures taken in Bismarck, and we came back, and we had another evening meal there again with all the guests at New Salem Auditorium. And then that evening we had a dance, and it was a big dance, and Mike Harroff from Dickinson played for our dance with his band. And we danced until midnight. By then our feet hurt so bad with no shoes on, because he danced every dance, that I know we ended up taking a break and going over to my sister-in-law Ann's parents' house and soaking our feet in the bathtub of cold water with our wedding clothes on. By then, though, I was changing dresses. I got dressed in a regular dress and took off my wedding dress.
And what time did you have to change from your wedding dress?
This was about 1 o'clock, midnight.
Was that
from
tradition?
Between. That was kind of a tradition to do that.
And why is that?
I don't know, they got away from that, you all of a sudden, decided I can't dance anymore in this wedding dress, I might as well get out of it. But everybody was doing it at that time. It kind of was tradition, that you change clothes after midnight.
And what kind of dances did you dance at your reception?
Waltzes and two-steps and foxtrots, you name them.
And what was your favorite?
The waltz.
The waltz.
Yeah.
Was Adam a good dancer?
Very good dancer. In fact, over the years, he was a much better dancer than I am. Yeah, because he could get out there and really cut a rug, because he would jitterbug and all that, He did that long before I even met him.
And did you have a honeymoon?
Yes, but first we spent the week out on my parents' farm that we were on at the time, because my brother was getting married the next week and they still had all the thrashing left to do. And so after our dance, we went to Bismarck and stayed overnight at a motel. And we were there all day and all the next night. And then after that, we went back out to my folks' farm, and I helped my mother cook for the thrashing crew, and Adam helped the guys with the thrashing. And then my brother and Ann got married a week after our date. Then we first came back to Richardson here, packed our clothes, and went on a honeymoon.
Where did you go on your honeymoon?
We drove all the way out to the West Coast, and I had a sister living in Seattle at the time. We spent some time with her, and then after that we traveled along the coastline and back along the Columbia River, and we were gone about 2 weeks. Yeah.
Was that nice?
Oh, it was nice, really nice.
Was there anything else about your wedding that you would like to share with us? Anything interesting happened that day that was unusual?
It was a windy day, but no, everybody made it around well. You're always worrying about car accidents or something like that, but everything went really well. The meals were delicious, and I think most of my aunts would help with the cooking. that was cooked there at New Salem, and I remember the cake and the food and picture taking and all that. It got to be a long day, but you got through it. But it was a lovely day. It was kind of windy in the afternoon, but in the morning was beautiful.
And this is obviously more of your wedding photos here. Can
Yes.
you tell us what is happening during that one?
That is probably at the table where we were having a meal. And all the decorations were in blue, white, and pink. And I think my bridesmaids all wore blue. And flower boy down here wore a blue suit. But Adam had a brown one on, yeah.
So you had a large wedding party then?
Yes, the girls in my wedding party there are Adam's two sisters. My very best friend in high school, and she is still my best friend to this day. She lives in Washington, D.C. at Alexander, Virginia. And they come back here and spend the summer out on a ranchette that they have south of Richardson, and that was them on the phone. They can't find the picnic they were going to today.
And all the guys here?
And my sister Maggie is one of the gals on the picture there. Those were Hauck's. He was Adam's cousin across the road. This is my first cousin. And this was a Flickenstein, that's Adam's first cousin. And this was his good friend, Hauck, that lived in the ring barrier here. The boy was Adam's nephew.
Now, was it normal at this time to have colored photos in 1950?
No, it really wasn't. The only reason I have colored photos is because a lady that lived in Richardson that was at our wedding had just gotten a new camera and it was taking colored pictures. And she lined us up and took our pictures, and they really turned out nice, you know. And about 40 years later, I received them in the mail, the negatives, where she was dying of cancer and she was going through all her pictures, and she said, these will never mean anything to my family, you know. So she sent me the negatives to all of these pictures that I have here, which is really a treat because nobody that got married in 1950 or later, you know, ended up with colored pictures.
And on these pictures here, they're also of your wedding. Who are you with in these pictures?
The top picture there is my godfather and Adam's godfather, because then that was a tradition that you have them as your witnesses at the wedding.
And then right here?
Adam's mother, my mother, they had their picture taken with me. And then the next one. Our parents, Adam's parents, my parents.
And of course on the right, you're cutting
cake.
And what kind of cake did you have?
I can't remember where the cake came from. It was somebody in Bismarck baked the cake. In fact, it was on the same cake plate that my mother had at her wedding. I still have that cake plate.
And here, this is after your marriage? After your wedding?
That was taken on our honeymoon. I think my aunt then, this on Magdalene in Butte, Montana, I think he took that picture.
And then that second photo?
That we're on a trip to Florida. And that's a picture from then, probably in the 60s, 1960.
And the bottom photo?
That's Adam in his fourth degree outfit, which they belong to the KCs, you know, Knights of Columbus. And he got to be North Dakota Knight of the Year that year.
And what kind of ceremony did they have for that?
I didn't get what you said.
What kind of ceremony did they have for that?
Well, they have a convention and they get honored at the banquet and things like that. And he was Knight of the Year. In fact, we have 3 trophies over there that you see from here on my cupboard, where we got to be Family of the Year 1 year or 2. That is our 40th anniversary picture that our children put on a party for us in Richardson. And what you see behind it, they had made a family quilt for us with each grandchild and each couple did a square with whatever they were doing on the top in colored pens. And then Diane, my daughter-in-law here, is the one that put it together.
And that right photo?
Is on top. That, I think, was taken at, Carmen's wedding. So our youngest daughter, when she got married in '86, and I think that was taken at that time.
And then the final picture?
And that's 2000 because that's our 50th anniversary, and we had a big party at the Social Center in Richardson.
And what do you remember about this party?
Well, we had Mass in the morning at St. Mary's Church and a blessing, and then we had breakfast at the Social Center, and then the afternoon we had a party where people could come anytime and go anytime they wanna, and serve the lunch with it too. And we had an orchestra there too, a couple of guys that played, and we could dance and things like that, and reminisce and party.